Orange in the day, black in the night. Stripes in our veins, sparks gonna fly. The beast is awake, orange, black and white. Cause when the jungle come alive, who day we ignite in Cincinnati, we gon' rise in the jungle, we unite in dripping orange and black and white. Who day when we fight, live and die in these stripes. Wake up the beast, every game day is a feast. Time to bust it off the leash. In the jungle, dripping heat. Tiger stripe the city streets. East side, stand up. West side, stand up. If you reppin', who day? Time to put your hands up. Bengals stripes, we in it. New day, new age, yeah, we get it. Cincinnati, jungle fitted. Who day in our house, we win it. Orange and black and white, we build it. Earn our stripes, you know we kill it. Bleed our colors, jungle dripping. Nasty, natty, yeah, we lit it. Lit the crowd, get the city loud. Yeah, we feasting now. Fit the bounce, make the city howl. Now we beastin' now. Thunder through the tunnel, from the sideline to the huddle. Stripes be tatted on the jungle when we flex that who they muscle on them. Stripes, Cincinnati, we gon' rise in the jungle, we unite in dripping orange and black and white. Who day when we fight, live and die in these stripes. Now who gotta move like it on? Now who wanna move closing on? Now who wanna move on? If you got stripes and you let the city know you rock 'em, yeah we got 'em, yeah we fought 'em. Like that black and orange on bottle, bingo bottle, never stop it till the beast.
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the show. This is Bengals Talk with Strawberry Ice. I'm your host, the Iceman, Jeff Turnipole. And as always, I'm bringing you sports and Bengals Talk from a West Side point of view right here in the great city of Cincinnati, Ohio, home of the back-to-back AFC North champion Cincinnati Bengals. Not to be a favor, if you found the show, hit that like and subscribe button. Smash that thumbs up. You guys are awesome. I'm up to 2,123 subscribers. It's all thanks to you guys. I appreciate every single one of you guys. So if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, why not? Please do so. Please go to the YouTube channel Bengals Talk with Strawberry Ice. Hit the subscription button, hit the bell for the notification, and every time I go live, you'll be notified. Also, exclusively in the YouTube chat crew, we're doing super chats. So if you have a question that you're dying to ask Jake Liscow, who will be joining the show on, I know he's got a really tight window, but he will be on. He's not in the waiting room yet, but he's coming on. He said be on close to 1:30 as it can be. But if you have a really good question you want to ask him, or you just want to support the show, please give me a super chat. I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, I'm coming to you live from the Ice Cave. The Ice Cave is brought to you by T Properties. T Properties, quality housing for quality people. Check out their website at www.tpropertiesllc.com for all your rental property management needs and your rental needs. So if you got a rental property or you're looking for a rental property, a house, an apartment, a condo, like I said, a rental property you don't want to manage anymore, give T Properties a shot. They will take care of the rest for you. And as always, you know what? Sponsored by Jackpot Joey, jackpotjoey9.com. We got the hoodies, we got the hats, we got the flags, we got all kinds of stuff. We also got beer. It's from Brink Brewery. So make sure you guys go check that out. It's there, right there in the heart of Hamilton. I also got a cork bottle and Jungle Gyms. Portions of the proceeds go to the Joe Burrow Hunger Relief Fund and the Joe Burrow Fund. And as you know, if you don't know, you should know, I'm also sponsored by Betfred. Betfred Sports. Sports gambling is legal in Ohio as of the beginning of the year. So if you have not signed up yet, they're giving money away. Just go out there, make a couple bets. We got Reds opening day coming up you can bet on. We got the NBA coming up. We got the playoffs coming up. We got NHL hockey coming up. I don't know if they got the XFL on there, but I would like them to do that because that's kind of cool. Anyway, what's going on, everybody in the chat? I know I'm coming at you early. I got 3 shows today. And everybody's like, why are you doing 3 today? Well, I'm trying to get Jake Liscow on for probably the last year. I know he's really busy. So he said he'd come on at 1:30. I've been trying to get Gary Miller on. If you don't know who he is, you're watching and you're not local here. Gary Miller, he's a former ESPN anchor. He's also the local sports anchor here on Channel 12 ABC. So he'll be on at 3 o'clock today. I got Jake on here in a little bit. Like I said, he was doing a show. He said he's running a little behind, so hopefully he'll be jumping on. And then tonight at 7, so no show at 5:30. Tonight at 7, I have the great Ken Riley II, along with Bengals captain. He's going to be joining me to talk to Ken Riley II about his dad finally getting to the Hall of Fame, maybe his induction speech, trying to get up there. If you haven't bought tickets yet to go up there for the Hall of Fame induction, I suggest you do. Bengal Jim has a a website that you should go to and buy tickets, so it all could be in the Bengals section. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to go. Got the same freaking day as my family reunion that we have every year. So I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, what's up to everybody in the chat? Strangers in there. Hooday88's in there. What's going on? Michael Madden, what do you got here? What's everyone's opinion on Taylor Lauren? I don't see. I've heard that he was going to retire, and I've heard he's more interested in podcasts. But he also, I heard, said that the Bengals are one of his choices. So I don't know. It's a good question. At first I kind of like, pass on him, but then maybe, I mean, for me, if he's cheap and he wants to come and try to win a ring, might be worth a shot. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Like I said, we are just at the beginning stages of this offseason. It is the beginning of the NFL Combine. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of a geek when it comes to this. I actually got tickets, and we'll go Sunday. We're going to go down to Indianapolis and watch, I think it's going to be the running backs and the DBs, I think, or linebackers. I wish it was going to be the tight ends. That would have been awesome. But that is what is happening this week. All right, guys, he has made it. He is a very busy man. He's been on the show a couple of times. I appreciate Jake coming on the show, but let's get to Jake Liscow from Locked On Bengals. Jake, what's going on, my man?
That's quite a photo with the roar going on, man. That's a funny intro. Yeah, how's it going?
Good, brother. I appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy man, so I mean, you're Locked On Bengals is just blowing up, man. You and James are all over the place.
Oh yeah, we stay on top. That's how we do over there on Locked On Bengals. Just finished recording a nice 2-parter that we'll be dropping the first episode of tonight, and then we got the Combine coming up this week. James is going over to Indianapolis tomorrow. It's going to be a good week.
Exactly. I was just talking about that. I'm going Sunday. I got tickets to go Sunday, so I don't think I'll see James, but because I'll be up in the stands. James is down lower.
He'll probably be home by then. But
yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I would love to go. Actually, I would love to go Saturday, but I actually work Saturday. That's when I think the quarterbacks are throwing. But what's your opinion in general about the Combine? Like, how much of that do you use in your evaluation, or you just throw it out the window? It's guys in t-shirts and shorts.
It's a great day for that question because Kentley Platt at MathBomb on Twitter just has managed to let me pull up exactly what he said.
Okay,
but managed to pull all of the NFL rosters athletic testing data, which he does relative athletic score for anybody who doesn't know. And
actually, I think he's gonna be on my show tomorrow. I think.
Great. Yeah. So relative athletic score is how does this test compare to historic testing numbers? So, for example, one of the guys that he talked about, he tweeted about this morning, is the guy named David Roach, a free safety out of Texas Christian, TCU. In 2008, he ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, which is in the 80th percentile for 40-yard dashes for free safety. So what he did is he pulled all the NFL rosters into and has the RAS for all the players on active NFL rosters.
Right.
And what he found was, let me get the exact numbers for you, 81.35% of players of the 1,920 players on NFL rosters have a relative athletic score of 5 or higher, meaning you're at least an average or better athlete.
Right.
That leaves 18.65% of NFL players attested as below average athletes. And in addition to that, 45% of NFL players are 80th percentile or better athletes, meaning that 45% of NFL players relative to other college prospects coming out of school were in that, to use his words, elite range for athletic ability.
Right.
So how much do you use it? You got to use it. Because what this tells you is when you draft a guy like Tyler Shelvin, for example, his chances of being a successful NFL player are lower historically than when you draft a guy with really good athleticism. And so it's a piece of the puzzle. It's never the whole story. You don't just go draft a guy that has a 10 RAS just because he has a 10 RAS, because maybe he can't play football. Right. But when everybody can play football, you want to look at both of those things. And it's going to be a big piece of your puzzle. If you're breaking a tie, for example, between two players that you have similarly graded from a film perspective, but one of them tests as a 75 percentile athlete, the other one tests as a 20 percentile athlete, that's probably a tiebreaker in a lot of cases.
Now, how does that work when you have a guy like John Ross? Because you got thrown that out there. He ran one of the highest, fastest 40 times in combine history, and has been a bust. So, like you said, you have to use it, but I don't think it's the gospel, as you want to put it that way.
Well, no individual things. So the overall takeaway and what we've been doing, what I've been doing with Joe Goodberry for years, this is our 5th year, I think, of doing it when we put together our draft board, is that it's a piece of the puzzle. So like we kind of weigh different things a little bit differently, but one of them is, a film grade, obviously, production for any position where we can measure production. You can't measure it as easily at offensive line, for example, but in most other positions, we have good historical data for like the history of the NFL in terms of market share that we can compare players to. And then the athletic score is certainly part of it. And then there's, we use some PFF data as well. And so we could go back, in 2017 was actually before we started tracking things, but we could go look at like, what John Ross's analytic profile would have been, and maybe there's some holes in the analytic profile, right? If you go back and look at some of the production data, you look at breakout age is a big one for wide receiver, market share, another big one for wide receiver. So it is just a piece of the puzzle. Like I said, you don't just draft a guy because he's an elite athlete. Another guy like this in Bengals history is Jake Fisher, who didn't work out for various reasons. But it's not because he wasn't an athlete. Meanwhile, you've got a bunch of guys who you're banking on. So it's kind of like, are you banking on a guy being an outlier? Or if you like the rest of his profile, let's remove that risk, right? That's why I talk about it as a bit of a tiebreaker, as a piece of the puzzle, where if you have guys that are similarly graded, similar productivity, all these things, and one of them tests like a really good athlete and the other one doesn't, you're banking on an outlier for that guy that didn't test well to then be a productive NFL player versus the guy that checks all those boxes.
Right. And I think it's even harder. Well, obviously, the farther down in the draft yard, obviously, the harder it is. But that's where the Bengals really had to do their due diligence. And I think they did a pretty good job of last year with the first time drafting lower in the draft. And they tweeted out something earlier today, kind of explaining how they evaluate players and they go and they have the interview process and all that stuff. I thought it was really interesting. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's on Bengals Twitter. But it's probably about as in-depth as you're going to get without them telling us everything that they're going to do. How much harder is it, do you think, like for the Bengals, like say at 28? And for me, not saying we have to draft this, but this is a position that I think that needs to be addressed is right tackle. And that's just because we don't know about La'el Collins, and people in here in the chat have said, Taylor Lauren, I can't ever say his name. He got released by the Tennessee Titans. I'm kind of iffy on him, but where are you at? I guess I'm kind of circling back around. Where are you at on the right tackle position? Are you more of, because I would rather than fix it, I don't necessarily fix it, but have a veteran guy who can put in there and then maybe draft a guy, because I'm not sold that La'el will be ready at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I have concerns about La'el Collins' health long term. It wasn't like he was playing at an extremely high level all year either. Like he was fine for the most part. He was a bit up and down. There were times when he looked bad. There were times when he looked really good. I think he was dealing with some sort of injury all year. He missed a lot of practice, obviously, and that probably affected his play a little bit. But coming out of Dallas, what did everyone say was, he had issues. He had health issues. He didn't want to practice. The hip is degenerative or whatever it is. And so you hope that he's able to make a full recovery and be a player for you next year. But I agree with you. My position on right tackle has been that they can't go into the draft not having a right tackle, not having a starting right tackle on their team. I don't think that means, as you highlighted Jawaan Taylor comment, I don't think that means they necessarily go spend $13 million a year on a right tackle. I would be surprised if they are there. I don't think they go after a guy like Mike McGlinchey or Jawaan Taylor, although they did like Jawaan Taylor in the draft that year. So, if you're looking for a reason that they might do it. But I think they need to get somebody. And I do think that it needs to be a veteran, because I don't think that relying on Hakeem Adeniji or Jackson Carman to go in there and be a right tackle for you. At this point, like where you are in your cycle, you're coming off, you're beginning to exit the Joe Burrow rookie contract period. It just seems to be riskier than I would want to be.
Well, this is like you guys said, this is the time, this is the season for the Bengals. You guys put it on Locked on Bengals last week for all in. And all in means not go out and spend, to me, not spend $13 million on. It could be that, but I mean, we need to get somebody who they can rely on at right tackle. And one guy that Dale from Bengals and Bruges put there, and I'm going to mess his name up, but he's a tackle from the Vegas Raiders.
Illuminor.
Illuminor. Thank you. I kept wanting to call him Illuminati as Illuminor. Now he's one. According to Dale, he's was in the top 10 as far as tackles go, and their PFS has a projected like 4 or 5 million, probably more like 7 or 8, maybe 10. That's, to me, is around the ballpark that the Bengals would be talking about. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, Jermaine Illuminor is a very hot name on Bengals Twitter. Something that, jumped out to everybody who looked at the PFF projections, the contract projections. Brad Spielberger, who does a great job of projecting those contracts, has them projected around $4 million a year. He was a really good pass blocker for the Raiders last year at right tackle. The reason that his price is probably depressed a little bit compared to what you might expect for a right tackle who's played in the league for 6 years and just had a really nice year is that he didn't really play until this year. Right. So he spent a couple of years in Baltimore, couldn't really get on the field. When he was on the field as a backup, wasn't great. Spent a couple of years in New England where he was okay, then was a backup, or he got hurt in 2021. I'm not sure which of those things happened. It looks like he started the first 4 weeks of the year in 2021, so maybe he got hurt after that or was benched. I'm not sure which it was there. He was playing guard last year for the Raiders in 2021, and the Raiders were a disaster on the offensive line in 2021, as many people probably recall. But he's played all over the offensive line. He's played left tackle. He's played right tackle. He played some guard in Vegas, as I mentioned. And so it seems to make sense, especially at that price point. It wouldn't shock me if the Raiders bring him back.
Right.
That's something that I certainly wouldn't rule out, but seems like he would fit like a glove. And I don't know if that means that he's the guy that they end up with. But that is the kind of sandbox that I think you're playing in if you're the Bengals looking for a right tackle. It's the Jermaine Illuminors, the George Fants, the Kelvin Beachums, the Cameron Flemings, the Billy Turners, where you're not expecting a world beater.
Right.
But you're not paying for a world beater. And that's kind of the thing when you talk about the top of market guys, Jawan Taylor, Mike McGlinchey, you're going to spend $10 more million of your cap space and you're going to get a guy that's like, how much better is that? Is he $10 million better?
Right.
Is he adding that much more value? And that's the tightrope the Bengals have to walk, especially with Lyle Collins' injury status being a question. And hopefully we get some information about that. Maybe out of Duke Tobin at the Combine this week.
Right, because McGlinchey, some of his PFF grades, which I know some people like PFF, some people don't, but some of his PFF grades are the same as Jonah Williams, and Jonah Williams is another hot button around here for left tackle, and I keep saying he's going to be our left tackle next year. They haven't signed for the 5th-year option. Like it or love it, whatever. He's going to be our 5th-year or our left tackle next year. Now, one thing I do want to bring back to what you said about Illuminori, how he bounced around or whatever, and Duke Tobin said this 2 years ago, I think when they drafted Jax Carman, that offensive linemen are the hardest to develop. They take the longest sometimes. So maybe he's finally hitting his stride, found his spot, found his niche, and that, maybe that's why he did better this past year than he did at all the other stops. Just my thoughts on, because what's your thoughts on developing offensive linemen? How long does it take?
It's an interesting question. I think a lot of times development is more of an outlier than anything. And I think this is actually true for most positions in the NFL. Tight end might be the exception, where tight ends like almost unanimously take longer to become, good NFL players than any other position. A lot of times with offensive line, you don't see huge changes. And I know a lot of people are talking about that with Cordell Volson as well, expecting a big year 2 jump. A lot of times with offensive linemen for whatever reason. It might be because, like, if you're not good early, you just never get the chance again. And it might be, self-fulfilling prophecy stuff there where you don't get the chance to develop. But a lot of those numbers for offensive linemen are pretty stable. You might see small improvements, but you don't generally see guys go from, the Bobby Williams career arc where they're on their second team when they finally break out. You don't see that a ton. You generally see guys be pretty consistent. You see teams take gambles on guys that they like on second contracts, like Bobby Williams, but more often than not, they're the same kind of player. And Alex Kapp is actually another one where he took some strides with the Bengals this year. He was largely the same player, but he was a little bit better in some ways than he was in Tampa as well. And so I think each player is an individual evaluation. You have to look at like their age coming in, look at the quality of competition in college and kind of what opportunity they've had. And then beyond that, you have to get past the PFF scores, right? You have to look at the player individually. You have to turn on the tape. You have to, if you're not an offensive line expert, which I don't profess to be,
neither do I.
find the people that are good at evaluating offensive line play and pay attention to what they're saying about guys as they develop over the course of their careers. So like Mike Santagata, for example, pointing out that from Cordell Volson's, North Dakota State days to his early days with the Bengals, certain things were technically better right away. Even if the results weren't always great for Volson, some of the technique parts of his game immediately developed, and that's visible on tape. So it's really, you got to look at all those factors. But I think more often than not, you get this idea that, you can develop players and maybe it'll take a couple of years. The NFL doesn't really work that way, in my opinion, for the most part. Like you get an opportunity. If you don't capitalize on the opportunity when you have it, you don't always get that second chance.
That's why it's called not for long.
That's certainly one of the reasons. And, it's just hard for players to really change. And like I said, more often than not, you go watch a player in college after he's been a pro for a while, and he's going to look like a very similar player. Maybe he's a little bit better in the NFL. Maybe there's some things that are better, like refinement more than breakout.
Right.
You don't see breakouts happen a ton. You see maybe a handful every year, maybe one per team, maybe two per team, but it's not a ton.
I think my dog agrees with you. All right. So I know you only got a couple more minutes here. At 28 here, where do you think the Bengals are trying to get to? Because these are the in the draft in general, I think it's tight end, O-line, running back, and cornerback. Those are the positions that I think they're targeting, not necessarily in that order, but a lot of people said Michael Mayer might be there. The kid from the right tackle from Tennessee might be there, or the other one from Ohio State. Their names slipped my mind. But then BJ from Texas, the running back, his name's starting to come up there. I'm not a big proponent of taking running backs in the first round just because their longevity is short and you might be able to get a guy who's as good in the second or third round and you don't have to pay him as long. But where are you at as far as what the Bengals are doing on 28 and probably the targets in the draft?
Yeah, I think 28 is pretty wide open right now. It could be tight end. Running back would be surprising. It could be tackle. It could be defensive line. I think defensive line seems to be pretty heavy in terms of depth around the turn of the first, second round. So even though they're highly invested in defensive line already, it wouldn't surprise me to see them use a first round pick on a defensive lineman, even though they haven't done that, I guess, in forever.
Will one drop that far? That'd be worth, you think? I mean, I think a lot of them more at the top of the draft, I think.
The really, really good ones, there's like 3 or 4 at the top of the draft.
Somebody to spell BJ Hill to replace Larry Ogunjobi, somebody like that. Is that what you're talking about? A position?
Maybe. Okay. Yes. Or an edge rusher to mix in. Yeah, like that wouldn't surprise me too much. Corner certainly wouldn't be surprising. I think there's really good depth in this class at corner. Tight end, for the same reason, wouldn't be surprising, with a lot of people suggesting that there could be 4 first-round tight ends. I just finished watching Darnell Washington.
See, those are the two. I always get their names mixed up. Darnell Washington. Yep.
Wright is the one from Tennessee, the tackle from Tennessee. Yes. DeJuan Jones, the offensive tackle from Ohio State. And then like Broderick Jones, I think is his last name. The Georgia tackle is in that conversation as well. Anton Harrison, Oklahoma tackle, I think would be in the conversation as well. But it seems like the offensive line folks that I trust have very disparate opinions on some of these guys and when they're going to be ready to contribute. And I often go back to that 2015 draft when I think about this draft, when the Bengals are going to be trying to draft for the future like they did in 2015. But you just can't have those misses. So if you want to draft an offensive tackle to develop and be a starter for you next year, it can't be Cedric Ogbuehi. It has to be a guy who's still checking boxes, who tests, who has the productivity, who doesn't have this big issue in their game that you can't necessarily fix. And Jake Fisher, I think, I chalk that one up to bad luck. I did not dislike that draft pick at all. And sometimes, things just don't work out. But the other guy you talked about was Bijan Robinson.
Yes.
Generally speaking, I agree with you about running backs in the first round. I've come around a little bit on Bijan Robinson as I've been more exposed to him, as I've talked to some other people about him. We talked to Sam Munson about this on Locked On Bengals last Thursday, Friday. And the thing with Bijan is do you believe that he's a generational talent at running back?
Some people do.
Sam said that he's their highest graded running back coming out of college since they've been grading college players, which goes back, I think, at least 8 years now. Might be the best. It depends on who you ask. Might be the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson.
I've heard. Didn't Danny Jeremiah say that too? I think he
could be.
Yeah,
could be. I mean, obviously, Adrian Peterson was a generational talent. But if you think you get that, then you certainly drafted at 28 because it's priced in at that point, right? And that was a point that Sam made that I found really compelling. Is when you have that like top 5 prospect, but he plays a position that's so devalued that you can get it in the 20s, and not to mention the late 20s.
Right.
I think you can pull the trigger there and feel good about it. Then you have that 1% of your brain that's probably screaming, man, got to give a running back a second contract again. And look around the NFL, when you give running back second contracts, it's rough. But you really, I think, need to think about, can he help you win a championship in the next 4 or 5 years?
Right. And that's where the Bengals are at.
Is probably, yes, he does make your team better. But then there's also a question, what do you do with Joe Mixon in that scenario? What have they done in free agency to that point? And so some of it's a little bit hard to project, especially before the combine, before we get free agency and all those things. I think they are very open to non-quarterback positions. I think safety would also be mildly surprising, unless it's like Brian Branch falling, the Alabama safety, somebody really falling.
Right.
But what I would like to see the Bengals do in the draft this year is what we've seen the Ravens do really well in terms of scooping up those value players that are falling. The Kyle Hamilton, the Tyler Linderbaum draft picks for them last year, the David Ojabo in the second round. Like, these are guys that are really, really high tier prospects, but they're playing positions that are devalued for some reason or another. Or, they've got one knock that's causing them to slip, or just another position is so strong that it's pushing other guys down the board.
Right.
And when you're drafting late in the round, like the Bengals are, you have to get really good at identifying those guys that are falling that you really like. And I think they did a good job of that last year, at least in the first couple of rounds with Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt. And, another thing I really liked that they did last year is they tended to draft really athletic guys.
Right.
And so they weren't necessarily young, but what you prefer is to check all the boxes. You're young, you're productive, you have a good skill set on tape, and you're athletic.
Right.
But
exactly.
You get to a point where you can't get all those things at some point.
Only get most of them.
Right. And so you have to start to pick, like, okay, what can we hang our hat on in this prospect that we think can develop, going back to that development conversation, or has a role on the team? Because I think, like, you look at last year's class, they had a very clear vision in mind for each of those players they drafted and how they were going to fit both short-term and long-term. Tyson Anderson, of course, got hurt. Jeff Gunter got hurt. Didn't get to see those things play out. But I think that each player they picked was, like, very intentional. And I feel like NFL teams probably often feel like this is the case. But when you can do that and they fit those roles, then you're drafting well. They just, again, I keep going back to 2015 when they built that team up. And then they got to this point again, right, where they're trying to sustain. You can't miss that first draft.
But last year's draft gives me a little more confidence, because they knew they weren't going to draft or keep Jesse Bates. So that's why I got Dax Hill, and it gives me a little more confidence. I'm with you on that, because that draft ruined. I mean, it ended the run, because you let Zeitler go, you let Whitworth go, Ogbuehi, all these guys, you let them all go. Well, not Ogbuehi, but the Sanu and Jones, let them all go, and they had nobody to replace them. So anyway, you said you got 30 minutes. I'm gonna let you go on this. Are you gonna do some breaking news here? Are the Bengals drafting a punter in this draft? Because I know you love drafting punters and kickers.
Yeah. So I guess I'll explain that really quick. So
sorry, I had to.
it's okay. Yeah. So the issue with drafting specialists in the NFL is that the NFL at large is not as good, or is not better, is not good at identifying better talent and then using a draft pick on them versus acquiring them as undrafted free agents. The difference in productivity for kickers and punters and skill in kickers and punters from drafted players to undrafted players, and you compare them, is not statistically significant. And in fact, like a lot of times, the best players at those positions are undrafted players. So that's why I generally am opposed to using a draft pick, because that difference of hit rate on undrafted versus drafted for kicker and punter is much smaller than the difference on hit rate for a drafted and undrafted player at an actual offensive defensive position.
Right.
So yes, your chances of hitting on a wide receiver or a running back or a tackle or whatever in the 6th and 7th round are slim. For example, who remembers James Wright and Lavelle Westbrooks and, Mason Schreck, who stuck around the team for a long time, and Rod Taylor and, Jordan Brown. I mean, a lot of these players don't stick.
Right.
But sometimes you can get a guy like a TJ Hushmanzada in a late round, or you can get a guy that's contributing in one of those late rounds. Auden Tate as a 7th round pick was a contributor for a couple of years. Brandon Wilson, 6th round pick, contributor for a few years. Jordan Evans, 6th round pick. CJ Zama, 5th round pick, right? So it's like talking about using a one of those picks on a punter, instead you're just throwing away one of your shots. And the draft pick is such a crapshoot in the first place. Why give away one of your roles?
Yeah.
On a specialist that may or may not be better than what you can get as an undrafted free agent. Obviously, every case is going to be individual evaluation, and teams are going to convince themselves that their evaluation is correct because they have to believe in their own evaluations.
Right.
But we also have a lot of evidence that says the NFL isn't very good at evaluating players and who's going to be good in the NFL. And thus there's this idea that it's always better to have more picks than higher picks. On average.
Like a shotgun blast. You want more shots at it to be able to hit.
I like the rolling dice or whatever it is. Yeah, and you're going to hit some of the rolls. You're not going to hit some of the others. But
exactly.
Yeah, generally speaking, I'm in favor of using those picks on position players, but it would not surprise me at all if the Bengals drafted a punter.
Well, either way, it's James Rapine's fault because he always gives you crap about Unlock the Bengals. So I had to do it too. Anyway, well, just to let you know, last year I won to draft Ariza, the punter out of San Diego State, and God, I'm glad they didn't. So that was a good thing.
Yes, it's tough. You never know about that sort of stuff, though. Like that's totally outside of the positional value.
Just for pure punting, he's the best freaking punter I ever saw. On tape.
And I don't know if he would have been the best punter in the draft class last year, the best rookie punter, because that I think was Ryan Stonehouse.
Yeah, that's a lot of people came back at me. I'm like, oh, both of them are good, but that's the one I fell in love with. Either way, Jake, you've been on for 33 minutes. I appreciate you fitting me in. I know you're a very busy guy, very popular. You guys are on Locked On Bengals. We're killing it. James killing it with Bengals Talk. Tell everybody where they can find you when the show's coming, because you got a 2-part show coming up, you said.
Yeah, we're 5 days a week on Locked On Bengals, of course. So you can find us anywhere you get your podcast and on YouTube, all the places, 5 days a week. And we generally drop episodes Sunday night to Thursday night. So you have something to listen to on your way to work, Monday to Friday. We've got a 2-part episode coming up right now. We just had a 4-person panel with me, James, Mike Santagata, and Joe Goodberry talking about free agency for a couple episodes. So that's coming. We also have some combine content coming up this week as well. As I mentioned, James will be in Indianapolis talking to Duke Tobin, Zach Taylor, the offensive defensive coordinators, Lana Rumo, Brian Callahan. Hoping to get Brian Callahan on the podcast after the combine as well. So that could be coming. And you can find me on Twitter if you care to listen to my, in the off season at this point anyway, inconsistent tweets at Jake Liscow, which you can see if you're watching on YouTube in my name there on your screen. And appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Jake. And when you're talking to Callahan, tell him about Strawberry Ice. See if you can get him on my podcast too.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Appreciate you, Jake.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too, buddy. All right, guys. I hope you appreciate that and enjoy that as much as I did. That is the first of my 3 shows today. So I know Jake said they're going 5 days a week. I am pretty much going 5 days a week too on Bengals Talk. Sometimes I talk Reds and other stuff. That's why I changed the name to Bengals Talk with Strawberry Ice. So let's end this thing here because I'll be coming back at you at 3 o'clock. Got Gary Miller on there from Local 12. But I'd like to thank the Facebook groups that let me live stream, and I appreciate every single one of them. They are Houday Nation, Houday Legion, Bearcat Ruckus, Radical Reds, the Ohio State Bucknuts, the Ice Bar, and then you can follow me on all my social media platforms, all under Strawberry Ice. Bengals Talk with Strawberry Ice. Facebook still says Sports of Strawberry Ice. I'm trying to figure out how to change that. But anyway, just look up Strawberry Ice. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Twitter handle is at Jeff A. Trenopole. TikTok is at Iceman90. I will be pulling the sound off later on here and putting it on the podcast. It's on BeanPod, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher Play. Pretty much wherever you get your podcast. Please make sure you rate, like, and review. Leave a comment so more that fans can find my podcast. So if you're missed it and you want to listen to it on the way home from work, check it out on the podcast. YouTubers, we're at 2,123 subscribers. Again, I appreciate every single one of you guys. I try to get as much Bengals content out there as I can, as many different opinions of what the Bengals might do, may or may not do. Either way, it's an absolute blast. I love doing this. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. Other than that, I'll see you guys at 3 o'clock with Local 12's Gary Miller. That's just sports, baby. See ya!